Now, major news coming from Djibouti, and let me read it out. Djibouti has offered South Sudan an alternative port for oil exports, citing the risks of relying on a single route, according to a statement from the South Sudanese government. Now, Djibouti has approached South Sudan to offer it a new route to export its oil. You know, South Sudan is a new country, the newest country in the world, and South Sudan has wide or vast amounts of oil in the country. But one problem that South Sudan has, it is a landlocked country. And why does this make it a major news? It's because Kenya has the Lapset project. This Lamu port project, or the Lapset project, is also a proposal to South Sudan and Ethiopia to have exports, mostly oil exports, that will come from this country all the way to the sea, and goods that will come from the sea all the way to South Sudan or Ethiopia. So Djibouti has approached South Sudan. Currently, South Sudan is using the Sudan route to export its oil. Of course, Sudan right now is mad in wars and cannot be able to facilitate such a transit. Now, Djibouti has offered South Sudan this deal, and this comes at a very important time when the Djiboutian Minister of Foreign Affairs, Mohamed Yusuf, is vying against Raila Odinga for the AUC chairperson. We know that the two major contenders in this AUC race are Raila Odinga and Mohamed Yusuf. And guess who went to deliver this news to South Sudan? It is Mohamed Yusuf himself who went to the South Sudanese government, to Salva Kiir himself, to present that news that they are offering to have that route that will pass Ethiopia towards Djibouti to the port in Djibouti so that they can facilitate the movement of oil from South Sudan. Now we have two major countries offering South Sudan almost the exact thing that it wants. It wants access to the sea, just like Ethiopia always wants access to the sea. Currently, we know that Ethiopia is working closely with Djibouti because it uses the Djiboutian port frequently because it cannot use the Eritrean port. Ethiopia and Eritrea have a long history of not getting along together. So that means that Djibouti is a very strategic country to Ethiopia. And that is the reason as to why, by the way, Ethiopia voted for Djibouti time and time again, even at the UNSC. When Kenya was vying at the UNSC against Djibouti, Ethiopia did not vote for Kenya. Despite the long border that Ethiopia shares with Kenya, Ethiopia did not vote for Kenya. Ethiopia voted for Djibouti. So Djibouti is trying to use the same diplomacy to lure South Sudan into its influence. And you have to remember that a few weeks ago, Salva Kiir was in the country, and Salva Kiir, in his own statement, said that the Djiboutian candidate tried to go to the country and speak to him about his own candidacy, but Salva Kiir was adamant that his favorite candidate will be Raila Odinga. But now, things might change. It depends on the kind of the deal that Djibouti will offer South Sudan and the kind of agreements that they will have that can lure South Sudan into voting for Djibouti. You have to understand something, that in 2017, Kenya had a candidate for the AUC going against Musa Faki, and Kenya was a main contender against Chad at that time, between Musa Faki and Ambassador Amina Mohamed. And what happened in that is that Kenya lost, but after a very long and hard fight. Putting the Moroccan factor aside, what made Kenya lose was also the fact that its neighbors failed to vote for it. For example, Uganda did not vote for Kenya in the subsequent rounds because they went up to the 7th round voting to determine who will win the race, and eventually Musa Faki won and is the current chairperson of the AUC, but Uganda did not vote for Kenya past the 2nd round. Yeah, so these were the factors that made Kenya to lose. Burundi did not vote for Kenya even from the 1st round. So if your neighbors will not vote for you, it sends a very strong message, even to the countries that you are depending on from far and wide to vote for you. So the vote of South Sudan in the AUC chairperson is very, very important for Kenya. Mind you, Salva Kiir is the chairperson of the East African Community. Djibouti is not part of the East African Community Organization. Salva Kiir currently is the chair of the EAC, and his influence, of course, in the region really matters, because we expect that as the stand or as the principle of the EAC, that the leader of the EAC right now, who is Salva Kiir, is expected not only to vote for Kenya, but also to campaign for Kenya to win as part of the EAC community. We also understand that Djibouti has a lot of allies, more so allies that would like to align whether one is Francophone or Anglophone. And in that battle, the Anglophone will always lose. So South Sudan is not a Francophone country, it's an Anglophone country. They speak English. And if you look at the dynamics that Djibouti is putting forward, it is coming out as very, very bold to countries and offering them concrete deals. For example, if this pipeline gets to pass, it will cut across South Sudan and also cut across Ethiopia. That means that Ethiopia will also be benefiting as it goes all the way to Djibouti. So it means that not only is Djibouti luring South Sudan, it is also trying to solidify its stand in Ethiopia, making sure that Ethiopia will vote for Djibouti. So all this comes at a time when Raila Odinga is not in the country. Raila Odinga has gone to the UNGA to try as much as possible as well to campaign in African heads of states that will be at the UNGA. We know that at the United Nations General Assembly, this is the 79th meeting or the 79th summit of the UNGA. Most African countries are going to the UNGA. It is a World Cup of diplomacy where everyone involved in diplomacy around the world goes to one place and they're going to discuss critical issues that are affecting different countries and continents. So Raila Odinga is in the UNGA trying to, as much as possible, to make deals and make agreements and meet leaders that are going to determine whether he is going to be elected or not. So what is happening right now is Djibouti trying to put these bold moves into action to make sure that Kenya does not succeed. And if Lamu port fails, because we know that Raila Odinga just the other day was in China, and in China they were going basically to speak about the Belt and Road Initiative. The Belt and Road Initiative crowns Kenya as the gateway to Africa. And one particular port that has been crowned, aside from the Mombasa port, by the BRI is the Lamu port. The LAPSET project is part of the BRI. And one misfortune that perhaps is happening right now is that China did not say much about extending the BRI currently in Kenya, or the Kenyan projects that are aligned to the BRI. That includes the SGR and the Lamu port. So we are a bit short-handed. Kenya is a bit short-handed when we are talking about the Lamu port being an access port to South Sudan. And Djibouti is taking advantage of that fact that Kenya did not succeed in lobbying for the expansion or the completion of the Lamu port, making Djibouti to have that audience with South Sudan for possibility of having that pipeline built from South Sudan, Juba, all the way to Djibouti. Now, beyond that, Mohamed Yusuf also expressed that Djibouti will support lifting of sanctions on South Sudan, emphasizing the need to promote economic development. Now, these are part of the goodies that Mohamed Yusuf is critically giving to South Sudan so that they can build a better relationship. We know that South Sudan is currently under sanctions because of the instabilities in the governments, where there have been extensions of elections. Like this year in December, there were supposed to be elections, but they have been postponed 2 years because the president said that the country is not yet ready to have elections, and they have sanctions. And Djibouti is coming out to say that, you know what, we are going to give you even the support so that sanctions can be lifted from you. So Djibouti is targeting, or specifically targeting, South Sudan to get its vote come 2025 February on voting for the next AUC chairperson. And we know that Salva Kiir was here in Kenya and said that he will vote for Raila Odinga, but that is subject to change. As we always say here, diplomacy can change at any time. Diplomacy can change even in a second. Someone can agree to something right now, and an event or a better deal can be proposed to that president, and in the next second, they will vote otherwise. So this is such an example. When you come to 2017, Uganda did not vote for Kenya because of the political relationships with Kenya at that time. And that made Uganda not to vote for Kenya during the 2017 AUC chairpersonship. So this is also going to play because Kenya or Raila Odinga has to look at avenues on how he can lure presidents to sing his song by making such concrete deals as giving countries development agenda such as this pipeline or a proposal that they will lift sanctions or campaign to lift sanctions for such a country so that he can gain the votes of many presidents and secure that AUC chairpersonship.